Hey guys, Ricky here with DoD Contract Academy podcast, and today we've got a great episode, and we're taking a little bit of a different angle here. We talk a lot about potentially selling your business and how government contracts can increase the value of your company for such an event. I've never talked about actually how to sell your business, and it's not something I'm an expert at because I've never sold a business. But we have someone on the show today that is an expert at this, and his name is Jeffrey Feldberg. Jeffrey said no to a seven-figure offer and yes to mastering the art and science of a liquidity event, which we're going to talk about in the upcoming episode, can mean a variety of things that apply to selling your business. 2 years later, Jeffrey did say yes to that nine-figure offer, and we talk about that during the podcast episode today. For his e-learning company, I'm going to get this wrong, Embinet. Today, as CEO of Deep Wealth, Jeffrey pays it forward by helping you grow your business through the 90-day Deep Wealth Mastery Program, which, by the way, I've started going through, and it's really amazing. You grow your business and capture the best deal instead of any deal. Now, I know you're going to really enjoy this episode. He's just one of those really interesting individuals. I think the entire podcast is going to be enjoyable for you. There's a lot of great information. It's entertaining, and he's got an amazing story. This is the DoD Contract Academy podcast. I am Ricky Howard. I'm a former federal government procurement officer, and now I'm host of the podcast. We also have dodcontract.com, which is a online training and coaching portal for entrepreneurs, businesses looking to sell to the government. And we've just launched GovClose, which is our new CRM and pipeline tool. It's awesome. We're in the process of integrating everything right now. GovClose with DoD Contract Academy. So when you sign up, you're not just getting training, you're not just getting coaching, but you're getting a total system that we designed specifically for federal contracting. It is so much different than anything that you've used before, meaning you're going to have pipelines that you can choose from. So if you're a subcontractor, meaning you just want to work with primes, or if you're just if you're a tech startup and you want government investment dollars to develop your technology, your software solution, you can go to our SBIR pipeline, and those steps are going to be a lot different than the steps in the subcontractor portal. Or maybe you're an 8A business. This, not only do we have all of that built into the pipeline, but it does everything that your regular CRM and pipeline management and sales solution is going to do. It's going to tell you how many opportunities in your pipeline. What is the value of your pipeline? It's going to tell you what your close rate is. And that's extremely important because that's going to help you develop how big that pipeline actually needs to be. If you have a 10% close rate and you have a $1 million quota, you need to have a $10 million pipeline. And we go through all of that in not only DoD Contract Academy, but now associated with this system. So you could have the system, you could manage your entire team in there, all of your opportunities, and you have training associated with every step of each pipeline. So now you don't have to guess about what you have to do. You can manage it all in one place. We're super excited. Check out dodcontract.com if you want to learn more. And now to a very exciting episode. This is one of my favorite episodes, actually, and I've done over 100 episodes now. Is it my favorite one? It's definitely top 3. Check it out. Let me know what you think at the end. Take care.
There we go. That should be better for you.
All right, there we go. Hey, Jeffrey, how's it going today? Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Ricky, so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Really appreciate it. And for your listeners, for the community, I had Ricky on my podcast. I got to tell you, this guy, he hit it out of the park. Ricky, you were absolutely phenomenal. And I'm honored and delighted to be here. Thank you.
Oh, now I'm turning red. If they're watching this on YouTube, they're going to see me blushing. No, that was a great conversation. I really enjoyed being on it. It's the Deep Wealth podcast. And I have the exact title of that correct. Is that correct, Jeffrey? Really interesting. And it's a topic that I think is going to resonate with our audience because, and I've talked on this podcast a little bit about how government contracts can help you if you want to sell your business, help increase the valuation and whatnot. And we have a lot of clients that have been in our academy because of that. But I haven't had anyone on the podcast to talk specifically about what do you need to think about if you do want to sell your company, if you do want to sell your business, and you're someone that has done that very successfully, and I know trains and helps a lot of businesses in that area. I would love to dig into that, provide some value to the audience, and hear about your background and how that all worked out for you.
Absolutely. So maybe we can start, Ricky, very briefly with the origin story to set things into context. And for the listeners, I don't want them to think that I woke up one day and boom, I had this wonderful liquidity event or this exit and everything fell into place. Actually, it's quite the opposite. I can laugh and joke about it now. Back in the day, I'd be crying if I got $1 for every mistake I made. I would not have needed the exit that I had. So the origin story, right out of school, no money, no experience, no team. I started at the time an e-learning company. This is back in the day when the internet was just getting going. People thought it was a fad. It wasn't going to be around. Just to put things in perspective, for those of you that remember dial-up modems, think America Online, CompuServe, Prodigy. That's what it was like to access the internet. But anyways, I was literally failing forward, Ricky. I had no idea what I was doing. Living in the parents' attic, my friends from school out of my MBA program, they were signing these very lucrative contracts, vacations, cars, you name it. And hey, Jeffrey, what's up? Not really a lot up. And it was some difficult times. But despite my best efforts, the company became successful. My grit, my passion really held me in and kept me in the game long enough that when success came, I had that proverbial knock at the door. Very smart, very successful buyer from a large company and put a 7-figure deal or offer on the table. Friends and family incredibly excited. Jeffrey, you can, you know what, move out of your parents' attic. Look at this. Look at what you can do. It was all worth the while. Something felt off. I'd like to tell you when I ran the calculations, which I didn't, that it pointed me in a very specific direction. It just felt off. It was an instinct, a gut feel, if you will. So I said no to the 7-figure offer. I said yes to how do I continue to grow my business while I figure out the art and the science of, I'll use two fancy words, liquidity event. They're stuck up, they're fancy. What I like about those two words though, if you're going public, if you're taking some chips off the table, if you're having a full exit, if you're raising capital, liquidity event, those two words cover the whole gamut. Because the one thing a liquidity event has in common across all the different scenarios, the more valuable, what we call enterprise value, so the more valuable your business is, the higher your enterprise value is, the better off you are. So I began flying all over the country. Again, I had no idea what I was doing. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, sometimes not. Perhaps in this case it was. I was flying all over the country. I was meeting with investment bankers, M&A lawyers, strategists, business owners who won big, business owners who, quite frankly, they dropped the ball, they lost it, they blew it. And I asked some questions, didn't talk a lot. I took a lot of notes, and I began to put this system together for myself and my business partners. Fast forward a few years later, different buyer, different offer. We said yes to a 9-figure deal. And what's interesting about that is, Ricky, it was the same company. We weren't acquiring companies and became gigantic. It was the same company. It was really figuring out these tactics, these strategies that I learned from the trenches, that I learned the hard way. The skills that built the business aren't the same ones to sell it. Case in point, the 7-figure offer versus the 9-figure offer. And I'll throw two stats your way and then I'll throw it back to you. Up to 90% of liquidity events fail. So think of that. Your odds are, as business owners, we're all business owners, you, me, the community, everyone listening to this. As business owners, the odds are stacked against us. They're not set up for us to succeed. And that's really deliberately. And in part because of us too, because we're not preparing, we're simply showing up. But even worse, the second statistic, most business owners, when they have a quote unquote successful liquidity event, they're leaving anywhere from 50% to over 100% of the deal value in the buyer's pocket. Look at me. I was almost that statistic. If I said yes to 7 figures, I was leaving all those extra zeros in those 9 figures in the buyer's pocket. I had no idea that this 9-figure offer would be available. It would be out there. Really, from the effort of the team, from myself, it was there, but it was around the corner, over the bend. I couldn't see it. And so to bring things full circle, after the liquidity event, because Ricky, I should be on a beach, I should be having a pina colada, you and I should not be talking. But what happened afterwards, people began to reach out. And I felt their pain because I was there. And they said, Jeffrey, can you help me? Can you share your playbook? And when I looked at my notes, it was a bunch of scratches that wouldn't make sense to the outside world. And so I looked around. Are there other books? Are there seminars? Are there advisors? Are there services? And the answer is yes. Either they're very expensive and they really don't know what they're talking about, or they just don't have that experience. It wasn't from the trenches. So very reluctantly, myself, my business partner, we came out of quote unquote retirement and we created what we now affectionately and lovingly call the Deep Wealth Mastery Program. It's a 90-day program. We have 9 steps, and I shared with you offline, I did not have all 9 steps for my liquidity event. Some of those steps came from the biggest failures that we reverse engineered, but it's a 90-day program, and you learn step by step, day over day, how you're doing 3 things: how you're growing the business, number 2, how you're increasing and preparing your enterprise value by preparing well in advance of a liquidity event, and then number 3, how do you optimize your post-exit life, because success without fulfillment is a failure, and I was a failure in my post-exit life. I lived it, I've walked it, not a great place to be. So we put all that in there to really have done the heavy lifting for everyone well in advance. So that's a little bit of the origin story of how it came to be and where we are today. I'll put it back to you.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that you're not sitting on a beach, because it seems like the more people I talk to that have built something amazing like you have are extremely driven, and they're creators, and they're people that want to help others. Maybe that's part of your post-exit life and how you're going to satisfy that urge within you or whatever. But maybe we could talk a little bit about, and I know you have the course, so I don't want you to give away the farm, but what are some of the big things that you didn't know about when that first offer came that we could be thinking about as business owners? Hey, maybe we don't even know if we want to sell our business in the future, but what are some things that we could think about, or maybe a structure that we could put in place that if that moment came, we might be better off?
Absolutely. And Ricky, we really put everything out there, everything with the exception of Deep Wealth Mastery, we give away for free.
Mm-hmm.
It's our way of paying it forward. And so whether it's on the podcast, the Deep Wealth podcast, or you're coming to our sites for ebooks, articles, we happily share that. And so for your listeners, what we can begin to think about is when you look at your business, imagine that we are going to be buying a business, or we're putting ourselves in the shoes of the future buyer or investor. You don't just want any business. You don't want the same old. You're looking for a business that's really world-class and doing some very special things. And Ricky, what you're doing with your academy, with how do you go out there, bid for and procure government contracts, becoming world-class in that is huge, because you're now separating yourself from the rest of the pack. And this is what we call step number 2, X factors. What's an X factor? An X factor is something that insanely increases the value of your business. Mm-hmm. When done well, you're very unique at what you do. It's hard to copy or duplicate. So for an investor or a buyer, they're coming along, oh, look at this. Jeffrey and the company is a master at winning these government contracts. And Ricky, as you can tell me even better, and you're the world's expert in this, it doesn't get any better than when you have the government as a client. The money, it's in the bank, it's just about guaranteed. It doesn't get any better than that, and repeat business, and on it goes. So when we can become world-class in a number of different areas, this is the beginning of it. And then another question to ask, and we need to be really honest with ourselves, and this ties right into what you're doing as well. I'm sure when the government is looking at, okay, who are we going to select to be the winner of this bid that we put out there? Mm-hmm. Does the business run without the business owner? Mm. And I ask business owners, one of my favorite questions, please give me a yes or a no, nothing in between, no excuses, no but, none of that. Does it run without you? So in other words, if you were abducted by aliens today and they decided to bring you back 3 years later, is your business still around? Is it hopefully even bigger and better than when you left it? And for most business owners, that's don't pass go, don't get out of jail, don't collect your $200. That's the beginning and the end of the story. Right. And really what we want, even business owners, Ricky, believe it or not, they have a management team, but the management team is hamstrung because no major decision can be made or done without the blessing of the business owner. And it's something we really need to look within us. And the other thing that we can do, I'll throw 3 things out there, 3 strategies that are out there. So strategy number 1 was being world-class, such as procuring government contracts. Does the business run without you? That was the second area. Mm-hmm. And then really the third area, and there's many areas, but it's having the ability to identify what we call inflection points. Some people call them blind spots. And a quick example of that, we talk about this in the 90-day Deep Wealth Mastery Program. Most people know, if not everybody knows, the blockbuster Netflix saga, the modern David versus Goliath story that you had out there. And Blockbuster was the 800-pound gorilla. Netflix was this fledgling startup. You fast forward, no spoiler alerts here, everyone knows it anyways. Netflix ultimately puts the nail in the coffin of Blockbuster because they recognize that fast bandwidth, perhaps when they recognized it at the time was way ahead of his time, but they stuck with it. They found that inflection point and they invested in themselves and the company. Blockbuster knew that, but they ignored that. And so one of the things we talk about is, okay, what's going on in the industry? Which, by the way, I would imagine for government contracts would be of huge interest, where you can say to the government, hey, this change is happening in the industry. You should really know about this. By the way, here's how we've positioned ourselves to be able to deal with that, and we can protect you and the organization and the services when you go with us and become a client. And so those would be a few things that we can start thinking about.
Interesting. And actually, just to your point, I just saw a story about how Netflix is now about to buy brick and mortar stores, turning it full circle. I didn't even get to the point where I found out what they're doing that for, but really interesting. And you're right, the way industry changes and having your kind of finger on that must make a lot of difference. I did have a question that goes back to something that you were talking about, which is, hey, does the business run without you? And this is something I've heard, and I don't know if it's true or not, so I thought I might just ask you. So business running without you, what I think about there is some of the things that you talked about, like, do you have a team in place that are doing the work? If you just disappeared, does it still run? But some people build a business around themselves. And certainly when I first started, I had everything was in my name. My website was Richard Howard. My email was Richard. And eventually I got away from that because the advice I got was, if the business is reliant on you as like a person or an influencer or whatever, then it might be harder to sell in the future. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I thought I have the expert on right now, so I might as well ask you, how important is it to separate yourself, like your own personal identity, from the business, or is that not true at all?
It's 1,000% true.
Mm-hmm.
Let me share a quick story. It's a painful one for me. Back in the day, my e-learning company was called Embanet.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, it was myself, it was my wife, and it was really the traditional mom and pop. And we were growing, and we landed a very big account. It was a 7-figure plus account that we landed. We worked with them over time. We helped them grow. They became very successful. And then once they got to the pinnacle of their success, ultimately they left us.
Mm-hmm.
Very painful. They left us for a competitor.
Wow.
And when we look back, okay, why did that happen? What I realized at the time was, I understand why they did it. I didn't agree with it because we were world-class and the best of what we did, but it goes to show you perception is the reality for our clients. And they saw really a mom and pop shop versus going to a competitor who wasn't as good as us, but sometimes good is good enough. They
Mm-hmm.
were a corporate entity. There
Mm-hmm.
was no one person at the helm. So if I were to get abducted, okay, there's going to be a problem in that company. With the competitor that they went to, that wasn't the case. If the president got abducted, okay, they'll bring in another CEO or president. The show goes on, not a big deal. And so absolutely, maybe we start in the early days, just like before the DoD contract academy, rather, it was you, Richard Howard, and you're out there, but you were smart enough to change it now. And now you have a team and other people around you that is not just you. We absolutely have to move away from that. And let me flip the question, put it back to you, because I know you were procuring services on behalf of the government. You were speaking to business owners, doing all those kinds of things.
Yep.
All things being equal, they never are, but all things being equal, if you had two options, two different companies, identical in every regard, maybe even the same size, revenues, profits, if you knew that, service offerings. One was really held very tightly by the owner who ran it, and the business was, the owner was a business, and the other one was really a true corporation.
Yeah.
Where are you giving the nod to, if I could ask you?
There's a lot to government contracting as far as like the laws and the regs are concerned. But as Ricky Howard, the program manager, yeah, when you're looking at that, we would put small businesses on contract that were held the way that you're talking about if they didn't have that other company there that was just like them, right? So they might have might be a startup with a unique technology, and you could definitely get on contract that way. But you're right. If I'm especially do a large contract where I need to ensure that this is going to work over a period of time and support a lot of troops, and there are multiple companies that kind of do the same thing, you're going to weigh more, provided you have the right information, you're going to weigh it a little bit more heavily in favor of the company that has either longer and better past performance, or they have the infrastructure to support what you're doing. If they have a team of people that are supporting an event versus it's just the owner and maybe their kids or something, like that, is going to make a difference, and the government's going to know about it. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And that's one example of many examples. And again, having been in the trenches, remember, I'm just like all the other business owners out there. No one teaches us this stuff. We make a lot of assumptions. We believe a lot of myths. And so systematically, we go through those myths, we dispel them, and then get out there. Okay, let's stop believing and let's start knowing.
Yeah.
Whether, Ricky, you're going out to get an investor, whether it's a partial exit, whether it's a full exit, we can all agree on one thing. A liquidity event, in whatever form it takes, is the largest, most important financial decision of a lifetime. So said in other words, we have one chance to get it right. We really want to make it count. So don't screw it up is what
Right.
is what we're saying.
Sure. God, I got a million questions and we only have so much time here, but let me ask you this. So I've heard a variety of answers on this question. I don't know which one's true, and I know it gets complex. And I think when you mentioned you're running your business, different skill set than selling your business. Certainly, when I've been on calls, especially some of the early ones with lawyers and investors and whatnot that were looking at selling a business, they would use acronyms and terms that I had never heard before in my life. Much like the way my wife doesn't like to be around me and my buddies when we're talking about government contracting, because it's all acronyms that she doesn't understand. And so some of those acronyms may apply here, but if you're thinking about how much your company's worth, I'm sure this becomes a complex question, but is there some, I don't know, is there a rough formula that we can understand as far as what we're bringing in every year versus what we might be able to sell the company for? Is it 3 times your earnings? Is it 10 times? Is it neither of those things? What's a good way of understanding that?
Ricky, it's a very smart question that you're asking. And I'm going to give an answer that you're probably not going to expect. You may even say, Jeffrey, come on, give me the real answer. But I assure you, this is the real answer. And the first thing, I want to welcome you and the community to what at Deep Wealth we call the art side of growing a business and eventually selling it. Because the value of your company is not a complicated formula in a spreadsheet. And I know a lot of listeners are saying, okay, Jeffrey, I've been following you up to this point. Stop it right there. No way. Come on. The value is a complicated formula. It really isn't. And Ricky, I've had valuators on the Deep Wealth podcast. They say it in more or less the same way, different words, and effectively what they're saying. And one even came out and said, Jeffrey, when I'm brought in and he's evaluated, I call them the titans of business, the Ubers of the world and the others. And he comes in, he says, Jeffrey, the first thing that I look at, it's the narrative. I don't look at the financials. I don't look at the data and the facts. Is that narrative interesting for me? If it is, that's 80% of the value that I'll assign to the company. Then, of course, there needs to be some facts, some data, some stats that back that up. But I start with the narrative. And I want you to think about that for a moment. And what I love about what we do at Deep Wealth is not just about selling a company. It's about growing your revenues and profits, preparing for a future liquidity event. So when you do show up, it's a more valuable company. So we're out there as an example. Back in the day, Ricky, when you were going over government contracts to award. So if I'm now going through the DoD Contract Academy and I'm preparing for a bid, we could both agree the narrative behind what we're doing as a company, the why you should work with us, and the how we're going to really make life better for you, make life easier for you, solve your painful problems. That narrative is everything. And if I can capture your imagination and get you excited, I'm not only going to get more business, but my business is going to grow. And I've mastered this skill that when I show up for the liquidity event, I get my future investment banker very excited, my future M&A lawyer very excited. And then I get all the future buyers incredibly excited that we have a little bit of a competition. This is too good of an opportunity. I'm talking now as a buyer. You know what? I lost that other one and it went on to become a gazillion dollar valuation. I'm not going to miss this one. I'm going to overbid. I'm going to overpay to get it. I don't care. I'm not going to lose out on this one. I'm going to make that happen. It all comes back to the narrative. And ideally, this is a long-winded answer, Ricky, to your question. Ideally, we don't want to be a comparable to anyone else in the industry because people want to do that. It's natural. So when the investment banker comes along, they're going to give us a valuation before they take us to market. We want to be in what we like to call at Deep Wealth. We didn't coin this term. It's a great one. It's a book. It's the blue ocean. We want to be in our own blue ocean. We want to create our own category. You cannot compare us to anybody else because we're so much better. We're so unique. We're world class that we call the shots in terms of where the valuation is. So in your example, if a company is 3 times or 10 times the multiple of either revenues or profits, depending on how it's being valued, we're saying, stop the presses. You can keep the 3 times and 10 times for all those other companies. We are so good at what we do. We are so unique at what we do. We're well above that. And if you want to play in this ring, you better come prepared to go well above that. Otherwise, we have other interested parties who will. So your choice.
That is interesting. Yeah, there is and I hadn't thought about it that way. Much like, I should say much, there's a similarity with government contracting there, because if you identify an opportunity for the federal government ahead of time, early enough, that narrative becomes critically important, because you could convince the program shop not even to put it out for competition. I often said I always knew what company I wanted to hire when a solicitation went out. I didn't always get to hire them. There are laws and regulations on how we do things, but if you get a shop ahead of time and your narrative is superb and you really convince everyone that you are the company that can do this, not only that, if you can convince them that you're the only company that could do it, that equals a sole source contract. Hard to do, but you can do it. And it's a great approach. In fact, it's what we preach in the academy, is getting in there early and making sure you're influencing everything. So it sounds like that could translate to selling your business as well, which is make yourself unique, get that narrative down. I would imagine the other things have to be in place, right? But you have to be running your company well, and I would imagine there has to be profit, although maybe not, revenue of some sort. Because I always hear about things like EDA and how many times that you can potentially get for your company. But it sounds like that might not be as important as how you're differentiating yourself through your narrative and in the service you provide or a product.
Ricky, you're absolutely right. And what's interesting, what you just described, if you look at our system, what I love about our system, once you begin to understand the fundamentals, it's doing it, you're not even realizing it. So what you were talking about, step number one, the big picture. So in the Deep Wealth 9-step roadmap, the 90-day Deep Wealth Mastery Program, we start with step one, the big picture. What are those inflection points? And just what you're saying, hey, Jeffrey, you've identified something for me as a government that it's about to happen, but it hasn't happened yet, but you've now identified it. That's step one. Mm-hmm. Step number two, X factors. And not only have you identified it, Jeffrey, but you've shared how your company is world-class, how you are so unique, how you're so far out there ahead of everyone else. Step number three, we call it future buyer. This is where you master the art and science of thinking like a buyer. I know how to talk to the government. I create those very powerful and compelling narratives. By the way, we're not even talking about liquidity event. We're simply talking about, how do I grow my business? How do I get into new areas? How do I create a market disruption? And we can go through the other 6 steps. I'm not going to. I'm going to stop it right there. But you can see how very intuitively, without us really even knowing all the intricate details at this point in time, we begin to step by step go through this. By the time we're done, really, we are way out there. We're ahead of the curve. We're in a very elite group of business owners. Just like when people come through the DLD Contract Academy, they're in their own elite group. Something very similar here when we understand the process and really what's out there and how we're going to go out there and do it.
Interesting. Yeah. Again, I've got 100 questions, but there's at least 2 more that I want to get to today. So one would be, this is a little bit selfish, but I think a lot of people out there are going to find themselves in the same boat. Certainly some clients that we work with, which is, let's take DoD Contract Academy. I have multiple things that we're doing, right? We have a training academy. We have a high-end consulting where we work with bigger companies and help them through the government contracting process. Now we have this CRM and pipelining tool, right? And just taking those 3, would it make sense to, are we still there? Or, yeah, still here. I got a flash. I might have to edit that out. I don't know. Maybe we'll leave it in. But so anyway, I've got 3 different services products that we have. And the thought has crossed my mind, should I be separating these into different companies? And I certainly have clients that sometimes they have a services company that does one thing, and maybe they have a technology or cybersecurity portion of what they're doing, and they separate it into a different company. In your experience, if we're dealing with not the huge businesses, small, medium-sized company, and you have multiple things that you're offering, does it make sense to keep it all within your business, or does it make sense to separate them into different businesses and try to sell them as one-offs?
Another great question. And the short answer is it really all depends. So let me give you an example, and then we can look at what you're doing. Obviously, I know my former business, Embanet, very well. So at Embanet, we also had different divisions, if you will. One division, it was all about hosting online courses. Another division was about taking a traditional course and converting it into online. Then we had 24/7 technical support. Later on, we got into marketing services for students. We could enroll students into programs on behalf of our knowledge partners and universities. And then we added student services. So in that particular case, it was a situation where 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, 3, or 4, it equaled 100. Because combined, all of those things, it was if I can use a fancy word, the gestalt, the bigger picture of things that Without all those things there, we wouldn't have been as good as we were. And it was all in-house and we had full control over everything. In your case or in other situations, really have to take a step back and say, okay, what are we really world class in? Where are we drawing the line in the sand? And what does that look like for us? And if it's, listen, 80%, I'm going to use Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule. 80% of our profits are coming from 20% of these core services, and everything else is really just a distraction. Maybe we need to take a step back and say, okay, maybe that should be a separate company, or maybe I'm not even doing that at all because I'm shortchanging myself every minute that I'm spending here. I'm shortchanging myself by not spending it in the more profitable area where there's higher growth, higher revenues, all those good things that go along with that. It depends on what you want to achieve. And at the same time, here's another strategy that I share with business owners. Most business owners, they make a fatal assumption and they say, I'm going to speak as a business owner now. I have to know, it's my responsibility to identify well in advance who the future investor or buyer is going to be. So I have great news. Fire yourself from that particular activity. It's not our responsibility. It's really the investment banker's responsibility. And that's a whole other conversation. Yes, you should not do this yourself. And you should not be using your business lawyer to do it. You go and find the proper M&A advisors, whatever the cost is, it's surrounding area to what they'll get you. You don't know what different buyers want. And so, Ricky, in your situation, if you're going to have a liquidity event, maybe you're being open-minded. You're going into that liquidity event, you have different narratives prepared. And for one of the top buyers, you've narrowed it down. As an example, in our competitive bid, we had close, I'm rounding up here, it wasn't quite this much, but it wasn't far off. We had close to 200 different buyers that were interested. We really created a frenzy thanks to the investment banker. And once we identified the top 5, this is where you can take a look and say, okay, we never know for certain, but this one over here is really only interested in this one area here, this one department that we have. The others really, they're going to sell off or they want nothing to do. And so then maybe at that point you could say, okay, for this one particular buyer, we're going to change the narrative. It's only this that we're selling and we'll separate everything else. Oh, but these other ones here, yeah, they want the full meal deal. So we'll put all that in there. So we like to keep open. We like to keep options. We want to be flexible because you never know where or how it's going to turn out.
Interesting. Yeah, that actually solves one of my not my problems, but one of my questions, because my final was going to be, hey, I'm ready to sell my business. Where do I find my buyers? But hey, don't put yourself in charge of that. Run your business and find the right person to help you sell your business. I can see how that would be extremely valuable. Instead of trying to teach yourself last minute, maybe dealing with 1 or 2 buyers versus I'd like to have a couple hundred people in a frenzy. So interesting. And so where would they look? Maybe your website then, to if they like, hey, maybe I need to find this investment banker or somebody that specializes in negotiating or setting up my business sale. Is that something where now maybe they're ready for your course? And maybe you could talk about that a little bit too. Is it an on-demand course? Is it an academy? Is it coaching? What do they get essentially when they sign up, and when are they ready for it?
Short answer is yes. But what you're talking about here, where do I look for these advisors? It's actually step number 6.
Okay.
The advisory team, where you look for advisors. And you'll notice it's not step number 1. Let's talk about another myth very quickly most business owners make or they believe, and that is, okay, the day I'm ready, the day I decided, I had a great weekend, I decided I'm going to close this chapter of my business, start a new chapter of my life, I'm going to find an investment banker. That's where most business owners start. That's why 90% of liquidity events fail quite openly. And so the advisory team, it's one of the last steps, not one of the first steps. And the reason for that is we need to prepare. So Ricky, you're busy, you're successful, you're busy. If me as a business owner came to you and said, Ricky, I'd like to have some coaching with you. Now, depending on my circumstance, depending on what was involved, you're going to be looking at your schedule and you're saying to yourself, I only have so much time. I can only coach so many clients. And I'm in a fortunate position because you're successful that I can choose who I'm going to work with and quite openly who I'm not going to work with. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with the advisors. And I'll let you in on a little secret. Most advisors will never tell you, especially investment bankers, they ask themselves one question before they bring on any client. And again, this is from the trenches. You're not really going to hear this anywhere else. An investment banker is going to think to him or herself, why should I take my valuable time, my effort, my legacy, my expertise, and make you rich? They all ask that question. And if you don't know how to speak, if you don't have the right narrative, you can't talk to that, then they have lots of choices out there. You're not the only game in town. But when it comes to finding the best advisor, you're the best at what you do. I only want you. I don't want the second rate choice that's far down the list compared to you. I only want to work with you, Ricky. I better know how to position myself and I better be prepared. As the saying goes, you have one chance to make a great first impression, not just with your future buyer, but with every one of your advisors. So to answer the question, when I know that I'm ready to, at one point, not tomorrow, not even in a year from now, maybe 2 years or more from now, I'm going to be ready to sell the business. Could I sell tomorrow? Sure, but I don't want any deal. I want the best deal.
Right.
That's when Deep Wealth Mastery is a terrific option for you. This is where over 90 days, you're going to be spending between 30 minutes and 60 minutes, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. Part of it's on your own time, where you're coming in from your phone, your tablets, your computer, whatever it is, and you're going through lessons. And you have a workbook for all 9 steps. We have between 400 to 600 pages of workbooks. And you're doing that at your time, at your convenience. We send out a daily email. Okay, Jeffrey, today is day number 39. Here's what you're doing today. Keep on track or not, up to you. Then we have live masterminds where you can go through and, okay, I have a question. You're in a community of other successful business owners. And then depending on the situation, very selectively, like yourself, we will take on clients for coaching and helping them prepare for a liquidity event in what we call a chief exit advisor kind of role or M&A advisor service. So it's really the full gamut on your own time in a group setting with other successful business owners and entrepreneurs and founders, and then one-on-one coaching as needed.
Okay, that sounds amazing. And everything that you're saying resonates with the very little I know about what you want to do. I'm thinking through some of the advice I've gotten over the years, which things like making sure your bank accounts are separate from, because some people have a bank account that runs their house and their business. And I've heard, and I would suspect you'd confirm, that's probably not the best thing to have in place if you want to sell your company. But if you want to have a track record of separate bank accounts, or what I'm sure the hundreds of things that you could do to make your business a better, or put it in a better position to sell, probably the earlier the better, finding out what you need to do and start implementing all of that.
Ricky, you're spot on once again. Very smart comment. Yes, step number 4, due diligence. We actually have a 300-point checklist that you go through. Again, before you speak to any investment banker or most M&A advisors. What's interesting, Ricky, on the podcast, I've had Wall Street investment bankers who went on in their career, they became buyers of businesses, then they became really the owner operator of the business. And they all say the same thing. Jeffrey, before I start the business, I'm planning when I'm going to exit the business because I know how I prepare to exit my business is going to change how I run the business. How I run the business is going to change how I prepare for the business. And another fatal mistake, sadly, and I can't emphasize sadly enough, most business owners, what I hear from them is Jeffrey, I'm a little bit busy right now. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next quarter, when things quiet down, I'll think about preparing for my liquidity event. Now, Rick, I don't know about you, maybe they have a different calendar. Every time I check my calendar, I don't find tomorrow or mañana or the next quarter or when it's not busy. And when I do check in with them, or the team checks in with them 3 months later, 6 months later, oh geez, I really back then should have started the preparation because my business is now bigger. It's more complicated. My time is busier. I wish I would have done it back then. Now it's even more harder to do that today. And so when we start preparing today, just that old saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is right now, today. It's the same thing when we're running our business. Let's begin to prepare for that future liquidity event.
Oh yeah, no, that is smart. And where can they find it? If I know we're coming up at the end here, but so if they want to, I would imagine, I don't know if there's an application process or if they can just sign up for Deep Wealth Mastery, but where would they go to find you and to start taking some of the courses and go through the process?
Absolutely. And for the community, throw me an email. I answer my emails personally. Jeffrey, Jeffrey, at Deep Wealth, just as it sounds, DEPWEALTH.com, Jeffrey at deepwealth.com. And you can go to the website, deepwealth.com, send me an email, come to the Deep Wealth podcast through the website. All the resources are there. But if you have a question, you're not quite sure, hey, Jeffrey, what do you think? Or how would this work? Or what would that look like? Happy to have those conversations. And again, I'm always paying it forward. And I love hopping on a complimentary call and speaking with a fellow entrepreneur and business owner and just seeing what's there. And my commitment to everyone is, hey, if we can't help, I'll be the first to recommend someone who can. And just, again, another way of paying that forward.
No, that's great. So you can go to deepwealth.com, and you have very generously shared your email address. So good luck with that. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of emails from a lot of people. I think it also speaks to the fact that you really want to help people, that, hey, just send me an email and I'll let you know if, and we have the same process over here, because sometimes your product, your solution is perfect for somebody. Sometimes it's someone with a different specialty is what they need. And that's something that I'm sure a decision you could make really quickly, save someone a lot of time, or point them at your course, Deep Wealth Mastery, the podcast, some place where they can gain a lot of insight and benefit for the future. We really appreciate having you on today. Thanks again. And thanks for having me on your podcast. That was awesome. Just another great conversation.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, it's our way together of how we can really make a difference out there, pay it forward, and hopefully save people some time and help them get to their goal a whole lot quicker and really more effortless, and enjoy the process along the way. Thank you so much.
No, that's great. And everyone, thanks for tuning in this week to DoD Contract Academy. I know we took a little bit of a different turn here. We've talked a lot about bringing those government contracts in to increase the valuation of your business if you want to sell someday. So we had to bring in the master of that to talk to you guys about what those steps look like, give you guys a place to go if that's what you're interested in. If you want to look at increasing the number of contracts you're bringing in from the government, head on over to dodcontract.com. You can see what we're doing there. But thanks again to Jeff and his team for providing all of the value, and we will see you next time.